In the previous lesson on the workflow and testing our installation, we created a simple app and we created the interface in XAML code and then the code behind in C#. So you might think XAML is part of Xamarin or was created for Xamarin. It really is not. XAML was created by Microsoft before Xamarin came about. They took XML code and did a version of XML for laying out an application. So XAML is the extensible application markup language. It is simply a specialized form of XML, which is used for data. We do have a header in our XAML file, and it's telling us that XAML actually is a form of XML. And so this is created for you in the XAML code when we create a new XAML page. The way the layouts work in Xamarin.Forms is we have some type of page. Here we have a content page. And that content page is specified by the control name inside a tag and the attributes for that control. The attributes are will show up as red and the values show up as blue, though you can change those colors. And then we have a closing tag, and then we have a closing content page tag. Much like we have in HTML. We'd have a bold tag and a closing bold tag in HTML. So that's what we have here. We have our content page, we have our closing content page. Inside those two tags will be the information we want to display in that page. So you can think of the page as our screen. Inside the page then we're going to have a layout. And we used a stack layout which allowed us to put other objects in that stack layout and stack them from top to bottom. A layout also has attributes, so we changed the background color in our earlier demo and made it silver. Don't be confused by the fact I'm using blue here. Show you how the layout is encapsulated within the page. Notice it has a beginning tag and it has an ending tag with a slash as well. There are different types of layouts. Some layouts only have one child and some layouts have multiple children or multiple objects inside of them. A stack layout has multiple children and those children were views. The views are the controls that we want our application to utilize in performing a certain task. So in our earlier demo we had a label, and that label showed the name of the college or university. We had a button named BTN SMCC, which when clicked showed South Mountain Community College in the label, called LBL Campus. We had another button, BTN ASU, which when clicked showed Arizona State University in the LBL Campus label. When I had you duplicate this in your assignment, I asked you to add another label with your name in it. And then we had a box view, which was used as a spacer to pull the buttons up a little bit. So the two labels, the two buttons, and the box view are all views or controls, and they were stacked inside the stack layout using the attributes that we specified to space them as we wanted. Now, whereas the content page and the stack layout use this format of a opening tag and a closing tag, most views we typically put them all into one. So we have our opening tag, the view name, the attributes equaling some new value, and then at the very end of that we close that view with a slash greater than. You can, however, do the way we did the stack layout and have a opening and closing tag. And by the way, we can have multiple layouts. We can actually have a layout inside of a layout. We'll look at more complex layouts a little bit later, but this is the general format. A page, layouts, inside the layout are views. I'm going to encourage you to go to the Microsoft documentation for Xamarin, and you can get there by docs.microsoft.com/en-us/Xamarin. And there's some getting started information here. There's tutorials that you can look at for the different types of controls and layouts and pages. There's a tab here for Xamarin.Forms. On that one, we have a whole section here on XAML. There's also an user interface area, application fundamentals. So I would encourage you to explore this page a lot and get to know what's here. There's a bunch of sample apps that you can download and deploy them and see what they do and then make modifications to them. So in the user interface, under Controls Reference, you'll see links here to pages. So here are the different types of pages that we can have. So a content page, master detail, we'll come look at these a little bit more in detail. We have layouts. And Xamarin recently added some more layouts here than we've had in the past, but several different types of layouts. Some of these layouts allow us to have one object inside of it, such as a scroll view or a frame. Those are single content layouts. And then we have layouts that have multiple children, such as the stack layout, where there's multiple views inside of that layout. We have views, and there are quite a few views. So I encourage you to come through and explore these. You'll see more views listed over here on the left. And then finally we have cells, which we'll look at a little bit later in this video. So this is a great resource for you to get information. Use it as a reference. You can find information here in the guides. So for example, on a label, you can find a lot of information on the labels, the different types of attributes, and the different settings for those attributes, and how to modify the label. They give a lot of examples. So I encourage you to explore this throughout the course. We saw how to create our interface with XAML code. You can also create the interface in C#. We don't have to use XAML. We can create the layout in our C# code. We would do this in the constructor for our app. And you'll see that our textbook author, Charles Petzold, tends to do a lot of his coding in C# rather than XAML. Now to me, one of the big advantages of XAML is you have the XAML previewer. And I will say that when Mr. Petzold wrote his book, the XAML previewer did not exist in Xamarin Studio or Visual Studio. So to me, that's an advantage of XAML. I simply prefer to use XAML over the code, but I do sometimes come in and modify objects with C# code. I generally do my layout, though, primarily in XAML. We'll look more at how to do the C# coding, but you're going to pick that up in Mr. Petzold's book as well for creating the interface. So let's talk about pages. We've already seen we have a content page. That's sort of the standard page that we would use when we create a new page. That's usually the default. But there are tabbed pages. And tab pages have tabs, depending on the platform, we have tabs at the bottom or maybe tabs at the top. And each tab takes us to, in essence, a different content page. There are master detail pages in which we have a menu that slides in from the left, and we can select an item from that menu, and then we can see details about that. Now when I say menu, it might be items in terms of we're creating an app for a furniture store and different types of furniture, and I can click on each furniture listing and then see details about that sofa, about that table, things like that. Well, I said this slides in from the left. On larger devices such as a tablet, typically it doesn't slide in. You get the stationary on the left and then the detail on the right. So it depends on the platform you're using, and Xamarin will adjust accordingly to the device. We have navigation pages. The navigation pages give us a page title and a previous button to allow us to navigate backwards through a stack of pages we've looked at. And there's a carousel page. We're going to present information in sort of a circular Rolodex format by swiping left and swiping right to get to the additional information. Carousel pages are often used for displaying graphics. And then we have layouts with multiple children. We've already seen the stack layout, which lays items out from top to bottom. By the way, you can use a horizontal stack layout when we're going from left to right rather than top to bottom. And in some cases, we might have both. So you'll see an instance of both in the next video on stack layouts. We have absolute layouts where we can specify precise locations. Those locations, though, however, will adjust as we rotate the phone. I probably tend to use absolute layouts more for creating for a particular device and not for where I'm going to have several targets. The relative layout allows us to put items relative to one another by creating constraints. If you've done any Xcode development for iOS, the layouts in Xcode using constraints are very similar to doing relative layouts. And I actually like the relative layout in Xamarin better than I do the iOS Xcode layout. Then there's grid layouts. We can create a grid and drop items into that grid of columns and rows. Then we have layouts with just a single content. A scroll view might contain a stack layout, and the only child of the scroll view is the stack layout, but the stack layout can have multiple children. Scroll views are often used for text, where we want to have a lot of text presented that doesn't fit on the screen, and you can scroll through the text. The content view allows one object. Again, that can be a container that contains multiple objects. We can also add a frame, which is much like a content view, except the frame has a kind of a border around it, and we can do a drop shadow to it. It has a nice look and feel to it. There are other layouts that Microsoft has added in recently. These are the basic ones. These are the ones you're going to see Mr. Petzold use in his book, and ones we'll use primarily in class. But again, go to the documentation of Microsoft and explore the different options that are there. And then we have views. These are just a few of the views, but we have presentation views where we're presenting information, such as in a label, maybe presenting an image. We have a web view where we can actually present a website. We have trigger views. The button's the primary one we'll use. When the user clicks on a button, it's going to do something. There's also a search bar where the user can enter what they want to search, a phrase or a word, and there's a button automatically added to that search bar to then search some particular content. We can also get input from the user using things like date and time pickers. The editor is a multi-line text entry, while the entry is a single line text box or text view. Sliders, steppers, and switches can also be used to get information from the user in terms of making choices. We have activity indicator views, such as a progress bar. And then collection views, list views, pickers, and table views. And these will contain other items, such as cells, that allow us to present a collection of information. And so speaking of cells, we have 4 different types of cells that we can use inside tables or list views. And those 4 types are a text cell, which is what we see here. It presents some text. An image cell presents text along with an image. An entry cell, where we might have the user enter some information, such as in a form. And then a switch cell, which allows them to turn an option on or off. So going back to the documentation in Microsoft for Xamarin, if we click on the Xamarin.Forms, there is the sample apps. I'm going to click on that. There's one app I'd really encourage you to get. It's a little bit older app. I'm going to come down to the All XAML.Forms samples. There's a whole bunch of stuff here. I encourage you to find what interests you, download it, play with it. But there's one here called Forms Gallery. And I'm going to encourage you to download that into Visual Studio, open it up, play with it, run it on a simulator, and explore the different options. And what the Forms Gallery will allow you to do is look at each of the different views, layouts, and pages and explore those in more detail. It becomes a nice reference tool for you as well. So that's a look at creating interfaces with XAML. As I said, you can also do it with C# code, but those you'll want to really spend some time playing with XAML, playing with the different objects and the different attributes. And the more you do that, the better feel you get for how to lay out your forms.